Start today with a specific feeling. It's not exactly a happy one. It's that gnawing sense of being intellectually homeless. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because on one side, you have these rigid religious narratives that you might have grown up with. You know, the angry God, the strict rules, the believe this exactly or you're out mentality.
Right. It's very black and white.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have this cold, hard scientific empiricism that basically says, look, you're just a biological accident, a bag of chemicals, and the universe is a void.
Right. It's the tension between a faith that feels way too small and a science that feels too cold. It leaves a lot of people with what the source material we are looking at today calls a spiritual ache.
A spiritual ache. Yeah, that hits home. And that ache is exactly where we are living today. We are doing a deep dive into a book that attempts to bridge that gap in a really surprising way. It's called Made by Love, for Love by Michael M. Rose. And the premise here is, well, it's massive.
It really is.
It's a synthesis of evolutionary science and theology that claims love isn't just an emotion or a nice sentiment. It claims love is the physical engine of the universe.
Which is a heavy claim. I mean, Rose is essentially trying to construct a theory of everything for the soul. And to do it, he pulls together two absolute titans of thought. First, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who was a Jesuit paleontologist from the early 20th century, and Thomas Jay Oord, a contemporary theologian.
And the goal, as I understand it, is to move us from what Rose calls a small story of fear and transaction into a seventh story of uncontrolling love. We have a lot of ground to cover for you today, from the Big Bang to the problem of evil, so let's get right into it.
Let's dive in.
So I want to start with that concept of story. Rose places a huge amount of weight on this right out of the gate. He argues that stories aren't just entertainment, they are our internal GPS. But isn't that a bit metaphorical? Does the narrative in my head actually change how I navigate the world in a practical sense?
Rose argues that it dictates literally everything. If your fundamental map of reality says, the universe is a hostile place where only the strong survive, you will navigate your life defensively.
You'll be on guard.
Right. You'll hoard resources. You'll view other people as threats. Rose references the work of Brian McLaren here, identifying 6 meta-narratives that have pretty much dominated human history.
And these are what he calls the small stories.
Exactly. You've got stories of domination, revolution, purification, isolation, accumulation, and victimhood.
That's a grim list.
Yeah. They all have different flavors, but the core ingredient is exactly the same. It's separation. It's us versus them. It's this underlying idea that power, specifically coercive power, is the ultimate reality. So if you want to be safe, you have to dominate someone else or purify yourself from them or accumulate more than them.
Which brings us to the alternative he presents, the seventh story.
The story of love. In this narrative, the universe isn't a battlefield. It's a body. We aren't conquerors, and we aren't victims either. We are participants. The big shift Rose is pushing for here is moving from salvation as evacuation.
Like getting beamed up out of a bad world.
Exactly. Moving from that to salvation as participation.
Meaning we were staying and healing the world rather than just trying to escape it.
Precisely. But here's the catch. To believe that is even possible, you need a view of the universe that actually supports it. You can't just wish for a universe of love if the hard science doesn't back it up. And that is where our first guide comes in. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin.
Now, this is a fascinating figure. I did a little digging on him. We're talking about a man who was a stretcher bearer in the trenches of World War I and a world-class paleontologist. He's digging up fossils in China with one hand and writing mystical theology with the other.
And that dual background is key. Teilhard refused to separate the physical from the spiritual. In the early 20th century, science was very focused on matter as just dead stuff, just atoms bouncing around in a void. But Teilhard looked at evolution and saw something else. He didn't just see random survival of the fittest, he saw a trajectory.
A trajectory toward what?
Complexity and consciousness. Think about the entire history of the universe. You start with raw energy, then subatomic particles, then atoms, then molecules, then cells. Simple organisms, complex mammals, and finally, humans with self-reflective consciousness.
So matter is naturally organizing itself into more and more complex forms.
Right. And as it gets more complex, it becomes more conscious. Teilhard argued that matter has an outside, the physical shell we can measure, but also has an inside, capacity for connection, subjectivity.
And this is where the love part comes in, but I do have to push back a little on the terminology here. Rose quotes Teilhard suggesting that gravity is a form of love. To a modern listener, that sounds a little, well, a little woo-woo. Gravity is physics. Love is an emotion I feel for my dog or my partner. Are we just playing word games here?
I get that. It does sound abstract at first,
Okay.
but Teilhard is using love in a structural sense. He defines love as the energy of union. It's the literal force that draws distinct elements together to form a new whole.
Okay.
So at the level of a rock, that energy is gravity or nuclear force. It's a primitive physical attraction. But as the entities get more complex, the nature of that attraction evolves too.
So when atoms bond, it's a physical coming together. When humans bond, it's emotional and spiritual. But you're saying it's the exact same fundamental energy of union.
That's the argument. It's a continuum. And Teilhard says this trajectory doesn't stop with us. He introduced a concept called the noosphere.
The noosphere. This is a term that feels like it really belongs in a sci-fi novel. Let's define that clearly for everyone.
It really does. So we have the geosphere, right, which is the rock of the earth. We have the biosphere, the living layer of plants and animals. The noosphere is the thinking layer. It is a planetary web of consciousness formed by human connection. Teilhard predicted that as humans multiplied and technology advanced, we would become so interconnected that we would form a collective mind.
And he wrote this in the mid-20th century, way before the internet.
Long before. But Rose points out that the internet, global economics, international scientific cooperation like the global race for the COVID vaccine, these are actual physical manifestations of the noosphere. We are basically becoming a single thinking organism.
That is both awe-inspiring and slightly terrifying.
It is. But for Teilhard, it wasn't random or terrifying. He believed the universe is being lured toward a specific destination. He called it the omega point. It's the moment where the universe becomes fully united with the divine. He called this whole process Christogenesis.
Okay, so let's pause and anchor this. Teilhard gives us a map of the cosmos, where evolution is actually a cosmic love story. We are moving from chaos toward unity. But that brings up a massive problem, the elephant in the room.
The problem of the actual messy world we live in.
Right. If the universe is a love story and God is luring us toward unity, why is there war? Why is there cancer? Why do bad things happen to good people? If God is driving this bus, he seems to be taking a very dangerous route.
This is the theodicy problem, the problem of evil. And this is exactly where Rose brings in his second guy, the theologian Thomas Jay Oord, because Oord looks at this cosmic picture and says, we have to completely rethink who is driving the bus.
This gets into the definitions of God's power. Usually when we say God, we imply the Almighty, the being who can do literally anything.
Correct. The traditional view is omnipotence. God has all the power. And if God has all the power, then every time a tragedy happens, we are stuck with a terrible dilemma. Either God wanted that tragedy to happen, perhaps to teach us a lesson, or as part of a mysterious plan, or God allowed it to happen.
And Oord argues that this makes God what?
A moral monster. Think about it. If you saw a child about to be hit by a car, and you had the power to stop it, but you stood on the sidewalk and just watched because you wanted to build the child's character or test the parent's faith, we would arrest you.
We would call that criminal negligence.
Exactly. So why do we accept that behavior from the creator of the universe? Oord's solution is radical. He argues that we have misunderstood the nature of divine power entirely. He actually points out in the text that the Hebrew word often translated as Almighty El Shaddai might be a massive mistranslation.
Really? What does it actually mean then?
The root is connected to mountains or breasts. It implies a nurturer or a mountain of strength rather than a controller of all things. So based on this linguistic insight in his theology, Oord introduces the concept of essential kenosis.
We definitely need to unpack that. Kenosis is a Greek term, right?
Yes, from the New Testament, specifically Philippians chapter 2. It means self-emptying. Theologians have used it for centuries to say God chooses to limit his power to give us free will. But Oord adds the word essential.
Meaning it's not a choice.
It's not a choice. It is God's absolute essence. Rose explains that in Oord's theology, God cannot control others. It's not that God decides not to intervene. It's that God literally lacks the capacity for coercive control.
Wait, God cannot. That feels like a massive demotion. If God isn't in control, isn't God weak?
It feels like weakness if you view power purely as the ability to force compliance. The might makes right model. But Oord argues that God's primary attribute is love. And think about the nature of love. Real love. Can you force someone to love you?
No, that's coercion or programming.
Exactly. Love, by definition, requires freedom. If God is love, then God must grant freedom. God cannot override the agency of humans or the laws of nature, because to do so would be to stop being love. It's a logical impossibility. So Oord proposes a new term. Instead of omnipotence, meaning all-powerful, he suggests omnipotence,
Omnipotence. The power of love.
the power of influence, the power of persuasion. God is the uncontrolling love that is present in every single atom and every moment, calling us toward the good, luring us toward the best possible outcome. But God cannot single-handedly guarantee the result.
This is a huge shift. So, regarding the problem of evil, the Holocaust, a tsunami Ord would say God didn't stop it because.
Because God couldn't stop it single-handedly. God was there, luring every Nazi to put down their weapon, empowering every victim, weeping with every loss. But God cannot break the structure of reality or override free will.
That is heavy, but strangely relieving. It means God isn't sitting up there just refusing to help.
It clears God's name entirely. It makes God the ultimate co-sufferer, not the remote, calculating judge. Rose describes it as God trying to squeeze the most well-being possible out of every situation, no matter how bad it gets.
But this raises a really practical question for you as a listener. If God can't control anything, what is the point of praying for help? What about miracles? Do we just scrap all that?
Not at all.
Hmm.
But we do have to redefine how they work. In the text, Rose explains that in this seventh story, miracles aren't God reaching down and breaking the laws of physics like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Miracles are instances of perfect cooperation.
Cooperation between who?
Between God, independent agents like us, and the physical world. When God calls and we respond and the timing aligns, you get these breakthroughs that seem miraculous. God initiates every miracle, but God needs a partner to land it.
It's like the conductor of an orchestra. The conductor can wave the baton and set the tempo and point to the section, but if the violin player refuses to play, there's no music.
That is a perfect analogy. And this brings us to the application part of the book. Because if this is true, if we are living in an evolving universe, like Teilhard says, with an uncontrolling God like Oord says, then our definition of love needs to be very sharp. It can't just be warm fuzzies.
Rose highlights a very rigorous definition from Orton. I actually want to read it so we get it exactly right. He writes, "To love is to act intentionally in sympathetic response to others, to promote overall well-being."
Let's break that down piece by piece. First, it's intentional. You don't stumble into love. You choose it actively. Second, it's sympathetic. You are feeling with the other person. You aren't loving them from a tower of moral superiority or pity. And third, the ultimate goal is overall well-being, human flourishing.
And viewing the world through that lens reframes the whole concept of sin.
Completely. In the old story, the small story, sin is breaking a legal rule. It's offending the king. In the seventh story, if God is love, then sin is simply failing to love. It is refusing to participate in well-being. It is actively resisting that lure toward the omega point.
It also reframes the cross, doesn't it? In a lot of traditions, the cross is viewed as a transaction, just Jesus paying off a blood debt to an angry father.
Right, the substitutionary model.
Yeah.
But in Made by Love, for love, the cross is the ultimate display of omnipotence. It is God saying, I would literally rather die at your hands than use violence to stop you. He reveals that the heart of reality is fundamentally nonviolent. It is the ultimate proof that God will never, ever coerce us.
So if the future isn't fixed, if God isn't controlling the outcome from behind a curtain, that means the ending of this story isn't written yet.
Rose calls this participatory eschatology, which is just a fancy theological way of saying we have an open future.
That's scary, though. We like to think it's all part of the plan. It gives us comfort.
It is scary because the safety net of control is gone, but it is also incredibly empowering. It means what you do actually matters. It means we aren't just passengers on a train that is guaranteed to arrive at the station no matter what we do. We are the crew. We are co-creators.
And this connects right back to Teilhard's idea of the zest for life.
Yes, Teilhard believed that apathy was the great danger of our time. If you think the world is a sinking ship that you're supposed to just evacuate, you won't bother polishing the brass or fixing the leaks. But if you realize you are building the future of the universe, that every act of love, every scientific discovery, every single moment of kindness moves us closer to that omega point, then you have a zest to live. You want to innovate. You want to heal the world.
It's a literal call to action. It transforms the believer from a passive spectator into an active participant.
Exactly. And that is the brilliant synthesis Rose is going for here. He takes the grand cosmic scale of Teilhard, the big picture of where the universe is going, and combines it with the relational ethics of Oord, how we actually get there through uncontrolling love. He creates a theology that fits the modern world.
It's a framework where you don't have to check your brain at the door to deal with your soul.
and where your soul doesn't starve in the face of scientific facts.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from the ache of the modern soul to the new sphere to the nature of omnipotence. But I want to land on a thought that Rose leaves us with in the text. It's a challenge, really, for you listening.
It's a challenge of image.
Right. If we are made in the image of this God, and if this God interacts with the world not through force, not through shock and awe or domination, but through persuasion and influence, what does that mean for us?
It asks us to look very closely at our own lives. How are we trying to solve problems? In our marriages, in our politics, in our management styles at work.
Are we trying to be almighty, forcing our way, demanding compliance, crushing the opposition to get what we want? Or are we brave enough to be omnipotent, trusting in the slow, difficult, but ultimately transformative power of love and persuasion? It's something to mull over today as you navigate your own world.
It's a risky way to live. Laying down the sword usually feels like losing in the short term. But according to Rose, Teilhard, and Oord, it is the only power that actually builds anything that lasts.
It's the only way the universe actually works.
That's the claim.
A massive thank you to Michael M. Rose for his incredible work in Made by Love, for Love, and to you for taking this journey with us. This has been The Deep Dive.
See you next time.